So let me just begin this Sunday morning sermon with a confession. You see, whenever I preach about the importance of rest, being rather than doing, I often share this message on my last Sunday before taking some time off. Meaning, this is one of those sermons when I'm preaching as much, if not more, to myself as I am to all of you. I don't know about you, but too often my life gets taken over by the need to cross things off my to-do list, which never is fully crossed off, and by listening to that voice urging me to work harder and to shirk no more. And by the way, I just want to make it clear, that voice telling me to do more and to not shirk, that voice is not coming from any of you. It's not coming from the Board of Trustees, and it's certainly not coming from my buddy, Reverend Leah. Rather, that voice is my voice, the voice in my head telling me to keep going, push harder, and move rest and meandering to the bottom of my priority list. But, and I'm guessing this may be true for many of you, most of those things that I think are so urgent that they have to get done right now usually can wait long enough for me to, take a breath, maybe take a walk, and to just do nothing and rest. Now, I know it may feel strange to say that given what I said earlier about the state of the world, how can I, a person who benefits from enormous privilege and comfort, preach about my need for rest and renewal when so many in this world are being harmed? Well, I'm not sure that I have a good answer to that question, but one thing I do know is that a broken world will never be healed if people are exhausted and burned out. A few years ago, I read an article about the epidemic of exhaustion that pointed out how much the voices of hate and oppression depend on people being so tired and worn down that they become numb to all the hurtful and harmful things going on. I know there are days, and I've certainly heard this from plenty of you, there are days when I just can't listen to one more story on the news or think about how harsh and toxic the world is becoming. And this complacency and unwillingness to face reality is most common when I'm tired, emotionally drained, and even a little burned out. And that leads me to just one simple conclusion. It is only the rested heart and the nourished soul that can mend a broken world. It's only the rested heart and the nourished soul that can mend a broken heart. So let's talk for a minute about rest. And I want to begin by simply asking, why are so many so tired and burned out much of the time? Why do busyness and overwork so often take over our lives? Well, much of the answer, I think, stems from the culture, the society, the economy that we live in. A culture that puts a premium on not simply doing and working hard, but on always striving to do more. Economic necessity and a crumbling safety net are compelling too many to have to work 2, 3, even 4 jobs. In addition, our pull yourself up by your bootstraps culture celebrates those who put in the 18-hour workday and work 60, 70, or even more hours during the week. And while advances in technology and communication have added convenience and connection to our lives, they make it harder to disconnect and decompress and to take time for calm and quiet. In some ways, I think we are so driven by the rush to do more and more that we barely notice how little time we take or are given simply for being rather than always doing. Our lives are often a blur and a race from one job, one task, to the next. That is, of course, until we are subjected to so much physical and emotional strain that our health suffers and our families and relationships are negatively impacted. And even when we are forced to slow down long enough to heal, we often do so in the name of recharging. I've got to recharge and recover sufficient energy to throw ourselves back into the economy of long hours and a race that never ends. And I think something else happens to us when we are caught in that hamster wheel of doing more and more. I know when I find myself overtired, I'm no longer able to really listen, to express as I normally would the love and care I feel for others and the world around me, and to experience those things that bring peace and serenity to my life. Rather than taking time to listen to the birds sing on a beautiful spring or summer morning, or slowing down long enough to gaze at a magnificent night sky, I keep going and keep doing, barely noticing, barely aware of the simple blessings that make my life meaningful and my spirit whole. And that's why it's essential. It's so very important to follow a different ethic and a different path. What Richard Gilbert calls the shirk ethic, and what Gary Shockley calls the meandering way. I must say, I love the word meandering. It's one of my favorite words. Even saying it somehow helps me slow down a little bit. Rather than being driven headlong from one task, one goal, one achievement to another, meandering allows, even compels one to slow down, to wander, to drift, simply to be. I want to take a moment now to show you a brief video of one of my favorite meandering places that I used to visit when I lived in New England. This is the Atlantic White Cedar Swamp Trail on Cape Cod. Now, I didn't record the footage you're about to see, but I have to say that it really reminded me of those times when I was privileged to meander along this trail. And Rachel and Nash, it's okay to play the volume on this. I originally told you to mute it, but go ahead and play it. I think it's nice. The person taking the video has a little commentary, but it's reasonable. So anyway, enjoy the next minute to 2 minutes of the Atlantic White Cedar Swamp Trail. Now, no video can do justice to what it's like to journey down that trail. Even though it begins very close to the ocean, not just a few steps away from the beach, after only a few minutes, you find yourself in what feels like an almost primordial forest of all kinds of plants, insects, birds, and other animals. But what I always have found most meaningful about this particular trail is that it makes me follow a path that is slow moving, winding, and indirect. A path that enables me to experience so much of what I miss when I'm racing from one task to another and in the grips of stress and anxiety. When I follow the meandering way, my life is transformed, at least for a time, and truly becomes about the beauty and blessings of the journey rather than about the countless destinations and goals I am always pursuing. And when I'm meandering, something wonderful begins to happen to my spirit. Did you notice in the video how many times the person recording it paused to look around, to become aware of their surroundings? That is what happens when we follow the meandering way. I become so much more aware, so much more at peace, and so much more grateful for the world around me. I feel, I experience, and I embody the beauty of life. And as I've thought about those experiences and the experience of meandering, one word that always comes to mind, I want to just say a little bit about, is the word Sabbath. Now, I know Sabbath can conjure up images of church buildings, sacred texts, and long-winded sermons. But Sabbath is ultimately not about theology or sermons or sacred texts. It's not even about attending a service at a congregation or temple or mosque. Rather, Sabbath is ultimately about rest and spiritual nourishment. Sabbath is, as writer Wayne Muller defines it, a way of being in time where we remember who we are, remember what we know, and taste the gifts of eternity and spirit. It is this understanding of rest and Sabbath that I want to lift up and celebrate. Not rest simply as a way to recharge our battery so we can do even more and work even harder, but rest as a sacred act and a spiritual practice that enables us to appreciate the joys and blessings of life. Now, before closing, I want to just say a word about rest and Sabbath and our congregation, UCville. More than anything else, when you come through our doors or join us online, I want you to experience Sabbath and rest. In Unitarian Universalism, we are often busy with lots of programs and projects and meetings, and I'm sure those will increase given the brokenness in the world. But as we engage in all of our wonderful work and our ministries, we must always do that work from a place of Sabbath and rest. So let me just wrap up by saying, as you find yourselves once again in the world of work and doing, give yourselves some time to rest and meander. Take time for being and not just for doing. Even if you're in the middle of an incredibly busy day in which you're feeling overwhelmed and at your wit's end, remind yourself to take even the briefest of moments to breathe and to pause. For when we experience those moments of rest and Sabbath, we find ourselves in a place where we're simply present where we can simply be, where we can meander, and where we can, as I've done when I walk that trail, where we can wander in the wonder of this magnificent world and this magnificent life that is our home. Amen, and blessed be.